Okay, well, welcome everyone. I appreciate everybody that showed up today. I'm assuming a few people will trickle in once they find the right building. Pitt Greensburg's not that big. This building's the first one on campus, really, so it shouldn't be too hard. What?
It's like a chapel.
Well, they do hold weddings here. In fact, back in 2007, 3 days after they got the fire marshal's occupancy, they held their first wedding in this event. It was mine. My wife Kirsten and I got married here on October 13th, 2007. So I know this venue very, very well. I'm Paul Adams. I'm a professor here at Pitt Greensburg, but I'm also the director of civic education for the League of Women Voters of Westmoreland County. This event on judicial elections in Pennsylvania and why they matter and why they're important is brought to you by three groups: the League of Women Voters of Westmoreland County, the Pitt Greensburg chapter Pi Sigma Alpha, the Political Science Honor Society, which I serve as an advisor to, and Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts, PMC. Thanks, Nina, and everyone for setting that up. A little bit about the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization dedicated to transparency and access for elections, voting, voter information, ballot information, anything that helps voters be able to vote more effectively, more frequently, more efficiently. The League is in favor of that. In that vein, if you're interested in candidates running for election here in Westmoreland County, especially this fall, Vote 411 is a website the League manages, which has biographical information and other information on candidates. Every candidate was asked whether they submit information or not. That's up to them, but many of them have, some of them have not. So please, if you want to go to vote411.org, I'm pretty sure it was .org. Please do so. In addition, there's more information out on the tables about the League if you're interested in joining, becoming a member, and what we do and the kind of things we do. There's plenty of information out there. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Nina Sabak from PMC to introduce our speakers and our event. Thank you.
Hello, I was back there. Thank you, Paul. Thank you to our panelists. I'm going to give you a brief overview of PMC and then we'll get to the races. Thanks for joining us tonight, and thank you to the League and Pitt Greensburg for hosting us. Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts is a nonpartisan nonprofit that envisions Pennsylvania judicial system in which everyone is assured impartiality, accessibility, and respect. For over 37 years, PMC has worked to educate all Pennsylvanians about the courts and how to navigate them with confidence. We are not offering legal advice today, and again, we are nonpartisan, but we do hope this presentation is informative and educational to you all. If you registered for this event, you'll be receiving a recording of the program and a copy of the slides we're about to use. If you didn't register and would like those materials, please just sign into the sign-in sheets and we'll make sure they get to you. Now on to our speakers. Judge Kim Berkeley Clark currently serves as President Judge of the 5th Judicial District of Pennsylvania.
She's retired.
I'm live correction on the wire. She is the former President Judge of the 5th Judicial District. Before being appointed to the bench, she served as Assistant and Deputy District Attorney in Allegheny County and received her JD from Duquesne University. She received the William H. Rehnquist Award for Judicial Excellence in 2017, presented by Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts. And as the evening proceeds, please correct me like that if I get something wrong. I'm only human. Alice Meininger is a lawyer and shareholder at Dentons, and her practice has included appeals before the U.S. Supreme Court and Pennsylvania Supreme, Superior, and Commonwealth Courts. A few of the issues she works on include zoning and land use, right to know laws, election law, and tax assessment. And John Sion is an associate in Denton's Litigation and Dispute Resolution Practice Group. His work represents national and state political parties, campaigns, and candidates, as well as election and constitutional law. He also dedicates time to pro bono representation. So we'll begin, and we're going to begin in two parts. We're going to have two parts, rather. First, we're going to go through these, by the way, these are events that we are hosting or have hosted. There's information on the flyers and the foyer if you're interested. The blue links are live recordings or live registrations. But our agenda here is to review the court structure and then go over research on election of judges. We'll take a pause after part 1 in case there are any questions and move on to part 2. And now I will turn it over to our extremely able speakers who will tell me when to advance the slides.
So I think I'm going to start. You get to start, Judge, to talk about the sort of the structure of the courts, and I'm gonna talk about the magisterial district courts and the Court of Common Pleas. So, yes, so this is kind of the structure of Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania court, starting at the bottom with the magisterial district courts. The Court of Common Pleas where I served, and I do some senior judge work, so I am continuing to serve in the Court of Common Pleas. And then our intermediate appellate courts, Superior and Commonwealth Court. And then, of course, our highest court and the oldest court in the United States. It's older, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court is older than the United States Supreme Court. And a couple of years ago, they celebrated its 300th anniversary of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. I think Justice Todd, Chief Justice Todd, and the other justices would want me to mention this.
And every opportunity.
And every opportunity. So, I'm gonna start by, talking about the magisterial district court. So we go to the next slide. How many of you, just by show of hands, have had a case or have been in front of your local magisterial district judge? And so sometimes we refer to them as the minor judiciary, but I don't like that term because I feel like there's really nothing minor about what they do. For many people, it will be the only court that they'll be in, the only judge that they will ever see will be a magisterial district judge, and they really do a ton of work.
It's front line.
It's the front line, they're on the front lines, and they have to be attuned to their community. So I've been trying to gently urge someone to change the name. We have the rules that govern them, or the minor judiciary procedural rules, and I feel like we should not use the minor when we're talking about them. So, they handle, as you can see, civil actions, that are less than $12,000. So it could be contracts that toward, slip and fall or something like that, landlord-tenant disputes. They do criminal matters, such as preliminary arraignments, and do things like setting bail hearings, and then they do, issue arrest warrants in misdemeanor and felony cases, and they issue search warrants. And they also conduct preliminary hearings in criminal cases where they decide whether there is enough evidence to move forward to an actual filing of a formal criminal information by the district attorney or attorney general, and whether there's enough to actually proceed to trial. So they handle a lot of really serious things. They also do the emergency relief or protection from abuse cases. So there are emergency hours where a judge in the Court of Common Pleas may not be available to issue the temporary protection from abuse order or a final protection from abuse order. And so that's usually like nighttime, weekends, and holidays. And so someone would go before a magisterial district judge to get a temporary order for protection from abuse, which would remain in place until the next court day. So that person then would have to go to the Court of Common Pleas and get an order from a judge there. And so that's one of the most important things that they do, because it directly impacts the safety of people, spouses, people that have intimate relationships, women, family members, children. So it helps to protect them. And they also then hear what we call summary criminal cases, traffic citations and non-traffic citations, things like disorderly conduct. And then they do marriage ceremonies too, which is, most of them really enjoy doing that. So it's a really important job that they have. They do a lot of different things. Go to the next slide. So the judges in the magisterial district judges, they're elected for 6-year terms. And then if they want to remain, they have to run for re-election. So they have to run every 6 years if they want to do that. Candidates for the office of magisterial district judge do not have to be an attorney, but if they are not a licensed attorney licensed to practice in the Commonwealth, then they have to take the state course and pass an exam. And this is overseen and provided by the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts, or which we refer to as AOPC. And so the exam is not easy, it's pretty tough. And so many of them, before they decide to run, will have already taken the test and passed it so that they know they can take office as soon after they're elected. Because they cannot sit, if they can run without having taken the test. But they can't sit, so there have been, I know there in Allegheny County, there was at least one magisterial district judge, one person that was elected. And I think he did 3 times to take the test, and he didn't pass, so then that office remained vacant, and then someone had to be elected. So both of them tried to have already taken and passed the test before they run, so that they can be seated. In this judicial district, the 10th judicial district, Westmoreland County, there are 16 magisterial district courts in Westmoreland County. It's not a court of records, and you can request a court reporter, but that's not what makes it not a court of record. Even if there is a court reporter there, it's still not a court of record in terms of whether you can take an appeal. So what happens is, if someone is not like the decision of the magisterial district judge, then they have the right to have a de novo hearing in front of the Court of Common Pleas, and so on the summary appeals. And so that's what happens. So we have judges that sit and hear the summary appeals from the decisions of the magisterial district judges. So a lot of them are from traffic violations and the non-traffic citations, disorderly conduct, things like that. And a lot of truancy citations or violations, those get appealed to the Court of Common Pleas. They get a whole new hearing, so it's really technically not an appeal, it's just that they get the right to have a whole new hearing or trial in front of a judge at the Court of Common Pleas. And then if they don't like that decision, then they can file an appeal with the Pennsylvania Superior Court, as it may be, or in some, the Pennsylvania Superior Court.
Judge Clark, can I just interrupt you for a second, but with the MDJs, with having 16 spread out through Westmoreland County, is the idea is being able to have the dispute resolution where the incident happened is a magistrate who might know.
Right, so I think that's the idea, to have it sort of more community based, to have someone in that office. They have to live in their district, so I'm not sure exactly how they're divided in Westmoreland County. There are 16 magisterial district courts, but for example, in Allegheny County, where I am from, there are a number of magisterial district courts right in the city of Pittsburgh, which is the largest municipality in Allegheny County. And then some of them are grouped. There might be other jurisdictions that, like the city of McKeesport, they have one magisterial district judge that handles McKeesport, but many of the smaller boroughs and townships will be combined. But part of the issue is for people to have access to justice, for you to be able to get to the courts as easily as possible. So the things that are every 10 years, after there has been a new census, the president judges of the judicial districts are asked to kind of review whether all the magisterial district courts are still necessary or whether they need more. They look at how the population has changed, what magisterial district courts have the most cases, which have fewer caseloads. But having been through this process as a president judge, part of the things that we consider is if we combine districts together to make one, is there a public transportation that's accessible for people to get there, because not everyone has a car, not everyone drives. So there are lots of considerations that go into that. But yes, that is the sort of the idea, for it to be more community based, and for people to really have access to justice, because that's where most of these cases that I would hear, not all of them, but many of the cases that we hear in the Court of Common Pleas begin before a magisterial district judge, and then some people, that's the entire case will be there. That's the only court they'll be in. So yeah, that's a very, very important thing. And obviously there are no jury trials there at the magisterial district courts. So we can move on to the Court of Common Pleas. So the Court of Common Pleas, we hear appeals from the minor courts, de novo hearings, and appeals not exclusively assigned to another court. And then we have cases that are sort of divided up into divisions. So the structure of the Pennsylvania courts. Now, obviously, there are many judicial districts in Pennsylvania that have maybe only one or two judges that cover a whole judicial district. There are some judicial districts that include 2 counties and there may be 1 judge. So that 1 judge will hear everything. But in the larger counties, they usually have judges who are assigned to different divisions. So we have, so the first thing up there is adjudicating matters involving children and families, guardianship, and probate will. So the matters involving children and families, so juvenile delinquency cases, juvenile dependency cases where there's an allegation of abuse or neglect of children, usually children, youth, and families is the moving party in those petitions for dependency. Those fall under the family division, but under the juvenile section. So family division usually is a broad term for both juvenile, what we sort of call juvenile court, and then domestic relations court, which would be custody, divorce, child support, alimony, equitable distribution of property, and protection from abuse also falls under the family division. In Pennsylvania, we have what's called the orphans court division, and so guardianships and will probates fall under the orphans court division, as well as mental health commitment. So if there's an allegation that someone files a petition that someone needs to be involuntarily committed to a mental health facility, that fall under the orphans court division. Termination of parental rights and adoption cases fall under the orphans court division, except in Philadelphia. By rule, there's all kinds of
It's always exceptional.
Those fall under the family division, but I will say in many jurisdictions and in most jurisdictions now that have divisions, the termination of parental rights and adoption cases that stem from the child dependency cases are most generally heard by juvenile court judges, so that they're having that 1 judge kind of follow the case throughout. Civil and criminal judge, and so in the family division and in the orphans court division, there aren't jury trials, so we don't have jury trials either. And then we have civil and criminal division, and so in Philadelphia, again, because it's a little bit different, they have a trial, what they call a trial division, which is civil and criminal, and the rest of us have civil and criminal division. But they call it the trial division, even though I sat in the family division for my entire judicial career for 26 years, hearing primarily juvenile cases. And I heard plenty of trials, but I didn't hear jury trials because we don't have jury trials there. But in civil and criminal division, they have jury trials. And so those in civil division, they will handle, it's what we call a lawsuit, plaintiff versus defendant. So it could be something like a medical malpractice case. It could be a contract dispute. It could be big commercial litigation. It could be a car accident. It could be what we call a slip and fall. Any of those things would fall under the civil division. And so then we have criminal criminal division, and that's all the criminal offenses except for summary criminal offenses. So summary offenses, if the only thing that's charged is a summary offense, then that would be heard by a magisterial district judge, and someone could request a de novo trial in front of the Court of Common Pleas. But if there's a summary offense is attached to other misdemeanors or felonies, then all of it would be heard by a judge in the Court of Common Pleas in the criminal division. And just to remind you that the civil disputes and issues that the judge that start out in the Court of Common Pleas are cases that involve more than $12,000. So
noting in Westmoreland County, there are a couple of the civil judges do the orphans court work as well, but the primary, the judicial work, I think, is primarily split between family and criminal. And then the civil and orphans court are sort of merged together.
Yeah,
That makes
yes,
sense.
it makes sense,
Yeah.
because even in a county like Allegheny, which is the second largest judicial district, we only have 3 judges assigned to the Orpheus Court Division. And so Judge Dower, our long time ago president judge, used to always say that the only reason we had three judges is you have to have 3 for it to be a division under the rules or something. I do think now we do need 3 judges, and when I was president judge, we had 3, and I also assigned a senior judge to hear cases in the civil division as well. So they're busy, but I would say that the busiest divisions, just in terms of the day-to-day, if you want to say grind, are the family division and the criminal division. It just, the work kind of never stops. So it's really busy there. So for judges in the Court of Common Pleas, the candidates, person seeking an office as a judge in the Court of Common Pleas, they are required to be a licensed attorney in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And they have to live in the judicial district where they're seeking office. So if a judge, someone's running for, Court of Common Pleas in the 10th Judicial District, which is here, they have to be a lawyer and they have to live in Westmoreland County, anywhere in Westmoreland County. Those are the only 2 requirements. And there's a lot of people who think there should be more because, for example, someone could graduate from law school this year, which is 2025. And, well, let's say they graduated from law school last year, because judicial elections are early in the odd years. So if they graduated in 2024 and passed the bar, that person could run for a judge in the Court of Common Pleas this year in 2025, even though they have really no experience as a lawyer. So there aren't any requirements that you have to be licensed to practice law for so many years. So we're elected for an initial 10-year term, and then we can run for retention. So it's different than running for election, like for election or re-election, like the magisterial district judges. When the judges run for retention, nobody's running against them. It's a yes/no vote. So the voters will say, yes, I want to retain this judge, or no. And if the candidate gets more than 50% of the votes, yes, then they get to be retained. Oh, yes.
We had an error in our slides, but the 3 judges in Westmoreland County who are running for retention, and we're gonna talk about that a little bit more when we get into the elections and why judicial elections are important, but there are 3 retention elections in Westmoreland County on the ballot this year.
And so the judges are, even though they declare a party, it's still, it's still nonpartisan. They can, if they get enough signatures, judges for the Court of Common Pleas can cross-file and run on both tickets. And that has happened in many jurisdictions. I think it's happened here.
One election.
And so therefore, you have a candidate in Westmoreland County that won on both tickets, so he's the only one on the ballot for November. Or he or she.
3 retentions, 1 election, Westmoreland County, fewer judges, so.
Yes.
Okay.
If the judge wins its retention election, is it an out-of-10 term?
Yes, yes. And then the mandatory age of retirement for all of the Pennsylvania judiciary is 75. It used to be 70, and then I can't remember how many years ago, there was the voters chose to amend the Pennsylvania Constitution to increase the age of mandatory retirement to 75. You can, if you retire, and you're sitting as a senior judge like me, you can't do that forever. There are limitations on how long you can serve as a senior judge. So you can serve as a senior judge until age 78 or for 10 years, whichever comes first. So if you retire at 65, you can only stay till 75. We have some judges, because we have some judges that were very young when they were elected to the court in their 30s. And so if they retire very young, they can still only serve as a senior judge for 10 years. So 10 years or to age 78, whichever comes first. So a judge that decides to stay till age 75, they want to work till they turn 75, before they retire, then they can only serve as a senior judge for 3 years if they want to serve as a senior judge. Many judges retire and they do other things. They go back and practice law, or they teach, or they choose not to serve as a senior judge. So,
Right, we're gonna move on to the intermediate appellate courts. So once you get through the Court of Common Pleas, or state agencies, there are two ways. Can we go back to the pyramid chart?
Absolutely.
So here we have the magistrate courts, we have the common pleas courts, and then Pennsylvania is unique in having an intermediate appellate court system that has two directions, the Superior Court or the Commonwealth Court. And the easiest way of explaining the difference between the Superior Court and Commonwealth Court is that the Commonwealth Court is designed to hear all cases being appealed from state agencies, so PennDOT, the DEP, the Workers' Comp Board, all of those appeals go to the Commonwealth Court. Anything coming out of municipalities, so zoning decisions, any municipal land use decisions, go to the Commonwealth Court. So it's a very specialized jurisdiction with a group of judges who understand the nature of their jurisdiction. It tends to be very much administrative law. The Commonwealth Court also has some original jurisdiction, which means it hears trials in very limited circumstances, but everything else goes to the Superior Court. But if you think about the Commonwealth Court as having that very specialized jurisdiction, we can go back to the Commonwealth Court slide, and then John's going to talk about the Superior Court. But we're proud of the Commonwealth Court. It was established in 71, 72.
so it's pretty new.
It's new in the relative scheme of things, but it is unique to Pennsylvania, and it was based on this understanding that we wanted to have judges who understood the administrative law of the world to be making decisions. And there was one of the original judges. I work a lot in zoning and land use matters, and there was one judge on the Commonwealth Court named Judge Craig, and David Craig had written a land use decision. It was right. It didn't matter. It's like 50 years later, I'm still saying, well, it's a Judge Craig decision, and they tend to be exactly correct because he had such a good understanding of how the land use system worked and how all the different parts of it work together. So it's a Judge Craig decision, it's right. But the slide says, describes that jurisdiction. Here's state and local government and regulatory agencies. It can act as a trial court when the Commonwealth is actually one of the parties. But the way that Pennsylvania funds education is unconstitutional. That's one of the recent decisions out of the Commonwealth Court. But it's very important to have that Commonwealth Court and the understanding of how the systems work. But then it has a sister court, which is the Superior Court. And the Superior Court, basically, we're going to go back to the open seats on the Commonwealth Court and the Superior Court, because, again, there are convention elections and open elections, open seat elections on the Commonwealth Court. Let's talk about the Superior Court first, and then we're going to go back and talk about the elections. John.
Okay, so yeah, as Alice mentioned, we set this up kind of purposely because it's easier to describe what the Superior Court does by first describing what specifically the Commonwealth Court does. So Superior Court, in contrast to the Commonwealth Court, hears appeals from the Courts of Common Pleas on any issue separate from what Alice already described. So if you have a breach of contract case, a tort case, criminal case, if it's appealed from the Court of Common Pleas, it will go to the Superior Court.
And the appeals to the Superior Court are the Common Pleas Court never made errors when Judge Clark was there. But if a lawyer or one of the parties in the case before the Common Pleas Court said that judge made a mistake, or there was no evidence to support that person.
Right, and there's different levels of scrutiny that appellate courts will apply depending on the nature of the appeal, but we won't get into that here. The slide here mentions that it was established in 1895, and the second point there, that is often the final arbitrator of disputes in Pennsylvania. So what that essentially is because you have the right to appeal, from a Court of Common Pleas decision, that's a right that you have the right to an appeal, and it will be heard by the Superior Court. Obviously, it'll cost you additional time, money, all that, so those are considerations that need to be made whenever you're deciding whether to appeal or not. Right, exactly, but.
People can file for free if they're indigent, so there are,
Correct, yes.
won't necessarily cost them any more money, so, because they will.
Some of the criminal cases.
And yes, some of the juvenile and family law cases too, where parties are indigent, then they will ask the court to grant waivers of. To pay for transcripts and yes, a petition for form of papyrus, and so. A lot of them, if the court agrees that they are indigent and to be able to perfect their appeal, then we will allow them to proceed without paying any money. So there is an out, for people that are indigent.
Right, and so what the second point is thank you for that. The second point of what it's getting at is since you have the right to an appeal, if you're heard by the Superior Court, it's often the final stop in your appeal. Because if you do not like the decision of the Superior Court, if they rule against you and you want to appeal again, what you need to do is you need to actually petition the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to hear your case. And the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, like the United States Supreme Court, can decide whether they essentially choose what docket they hear. So they don't need to hear all appeals. They have the right to essentially select which appeals they'll choose. And then Alice can expand on this and thing, but they'll choose usually cases that are of, great importance to the or there's area of law that's undecided, or there's some conflicting decisions, or it's a new development. That's kind of where the Pennsylvania Supreme Court will choose appeals based on that
There's
basis.
been many recent cases because just the world has changed so much, and so there hasn't been any precedent or any law to govern that, such as parenting. What is a parent under the law? With all kinds of ways that people can become parents. And so how as a parent how do you file for custody, or do you have a right to have, file a complaint for custody? So there's all kinds of new areas that the court is deciding, just the whole use of electronic evidence and all of those things have changed. Even in the 26 years that I've been on the bench, things have changed so much, it's so quickly, so the court has to sometimes say, yeah, we're going to hear this case, we have to decide this because it's in the best interest of the citizens of the Commonwealth for us to make some decisions on how people can proceed on these types of cases for which there is no precedent.
Right.
And if we can go to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, we're gonna go back to the election court. And both Judge Clark and John have mentioned, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court will only take, there are about 2,000, 3,000 cases that are brought to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court every year from all of the Superior Court, Commonwealth Court cases that have worked their ways up from the Courts of Common Pleas or the different state agencies. But you have to, before the Supreme Court will take a case, you have the party who is appealing has to file what's called a petition for allowance of appeal, and it is exactly that. It is the some people refer to as aliquotter, and that's the Latin phrase for we will take the case, we will accept the case. But the aliquotters granted are about, depending on the year, 5 to 10% of the cases that are brought in aliquotter. So when you're filing as a lawyer, if you want the case to be heard, you have to explain, like Judge Clark said, why this is a new issue, why this is something that is going to affect everybody in Pennsylvania. Why is this so important that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court should be taking this up and hearing it? And it could be a novel issue of parenting, or how do you deal with AI? I mean, there are new issues that come before the court all the time, but it can't just be, I didn't like what the lower court said. Sometimes you don't like what the lower court said, but that's the ruling of the court. And as John said, sometimes you stop at the Superior Court or Commonwealth Court because the Supreme Court said, yeah, no, we agree with that, we'll move it on. So there we go. I think we worked our way from the bottom to the top in terms of the Supreme Court and what they do. Oh, we had supervisory activities at the Supreme Court. I had forgotten about that. I like the litigation.
My boss.
Yeah, there we go. The administrative office of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, they do ensure the education of judges. They set the rules for lawyers in terms of what kinds of continuing legal education we're supposed to have. Judicial conduct, not that anybody ever does anything wrong. But they, at the bottom line, regulate the practice of law and discipline. It's all Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So they have a lot of functions that aren't simply hearing the cases, that it's an administrative function as well.
Right, because all that, they have a lot of, on their special committees, so there are procedural rules committees for virtually every type of law, so there's a juvenile, family, criminal, civil, appellate, and the Supreme Court oversees those committees. They're the ones who have, when the committees make recommendations for new rules or changes in rules, they have to be approved by the Supreme Court, and they appoint the members to those committees. And just as an aside, so since the Judicial Conduct Board is there, I just want to say, you know, in Pennsylvania, we have a system for holding judges accountable for bad behavior or for misconduct. So there is a Judicial Conduct Board to which anyone can make a complaint. Sometimes they are frivolous because people just don't like the decision, and that's why they're going to the Judicial Conduct Board, but many are serious and they take them seriously. And so the Judicial Conduct Board can do a number of things, one of which is in the most serious cases that they will actually file a complaint with the Court of Judicial Discipline. And judges can be removed from office, they can lose their pensions, there's a whole lot of things that can happen. So there is a way to hold the judiciary accountable in Pennsylvania. So I think our citizens should know that. There are judges who are required by administrative rules to do certain types of reporting every year. So we have to report, for example, twice a year whether we have decisions that are overdue, because they want us to make timely decisions. And those reports are available to the public. You could call the office of the administrative
Decisions on December 31st.
obviously, but you could call and you could ask the office, AOPC, if you wanted to see what Judge Hart filed, you have a right to have that, a copy of that document, and they will provide it to you, so you know whether I'm being honest, because maybe you have a case and you would say, well, she didn't decide my case has been overdue for a year, she hasn't made a decision. And I would have to be held accountable for that because I'm required not only to make those decisions, but if I have decisions that are overdue, I have to report them to the Supreme Court and be honest about my report. So some decisions are hard.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna pause here
yes.
and then get to the election judges. But were there any questions? I mean, we did a little civics lessons about courts in Pennsylvania, but is there any burning question before we move on to the election?
What we're saying with the retention,
Mhm.
how many times can you run for retention? Or is it an election each time?
So you can run for retention up until you turn 75. And so we have there are judges in Pennsylvania that might run for retention this year and 2 years later they'll have to retire, but that's their choice. Or some judges will decide, they require you to decide whether you're going to run for retention by the year in, I think, November or December of the year before, because if you decide that you're not going to run for retention, then that seat will be open on the ballot. So that's why you have to make a decision. But basically, you can run for retention.
So you can be a judge for like 40, 50 years.
Well,
Yeah,
you'd have to be pretty young to be 50 years.
But I mean, like it's a very ongoing career.
It could be, yes, it can be, more so, especially now that they up the age to 75, but then we have some judges who are not, I can stay till 75, I didn't stay till 70, so.
You didn't have to stay until you were 50.
Right, so, and we have more, some judges that are deciding to retire early because there are other things that they wanna do. You're limited as a judge in things you can do. You can't ever talk about political things, you can't ever come to political events, and sometimes you just, the work is, sometimes can be hard, and the decisions are heavy, and sometimes you just say, I've done enough, so I'm ready to go, so.
For many.
Yeah, that's right. It's just like, right, right.
Well, in like 10 years, that seems like the term seems really long. Why?
Well-
10 years is long, I think.
I would say that, I look at Judge Clark, and if you think about, if you're moving through different divisions and you're understanding how the division works and you're becoming better at your craft, and you're learning how to make the hard decisions and you're understanding how the law works in the family division, but then you're moving to the civil division and you conduct a 2 or 3 month long trial. It's like that 10 years goes up pretty quickly. And we had some I'll just say we had some judges in Allegheny County who, I mean, there were I grew up in Westmoreland County, and my dad was a lawyer in Westmoreland County, and I think some of the old time judges in Westmoreland County, and how the younger judges actually benefited from their knowledge and experience, and in having them as mentors as you went forward. But in Allegheny County, there were a few judges who was like, oh, please don't retire, because who else is gonna do what you do, because they had such a wealth of knowledge and expertise.
I will say this though, personally, so there's nothing that tells you how to be a judge. Law school doesn't teach you how to be a judge. Practicing law, even though you appear in front of judges, it doesn't really teach you how to be a judge. And so I would say like the first 10 years that I was there, I was really learning the job, trying to figure out how to be the best judge. And I did not get it right all of the time. Most of the time during my early years, I felt like I wanted to be, so I was a lawyer. I practiced in the civil division. I was in the criminal division. I was a prosecutor for my entire career as a lawyer. So the judges that I admired were tough. They handed down really hard sentences and no nonsense. And then here I am. I had never practiced in family or juvenile court, and I was assigned to juvenile court, and it's a totally different ballgame. And I will say that it was a little scary. And so over time, I realized like a lot of things that I was doing were not really effective. They were really not helping people. And so it takes time to realize that. And so I feel that you know, that quick movement of judges can be very disruptive to litigants. It can be very disruptive to the community. And Pennsylvania has many, as I stated in the beginning, many small jurisdictions that have 1 or 2 judges. And so to take a judge there out like that really quickly and then have to bring someone in new, I mean, it takes it's a process. And so I think there are reasons that happens, and so that 10 years is probably about right. I'm not necessarily sure that the age 75 was right when they passed it. I said, I don't have any dog in that fight because I'm not staying till 75. I have no intentions. So, but you know, there are some people that they're really good at their work, and they deserve, if they want to work up till age 75, you shouldn't take that away from them. So,
And the good, like I said, that I think that some of the judges, Judge White, Judge James, I mean, it had such a unique.
he stayed till 70, or 70 or 75. He stayed as a senior for
He
us.
stayed as a senior, yeah, but having that wealth of knowledge in my land use world, that was like, I wanna have somebody who understood the law. But there are other ways of, if you're concerned about like, judicial conduct, like we were talking about, there is the Board of Judicial Conduct, so if there were one judge in a county who was, you know, taking money off, you know, whatever, it's like somebody could report him to the Board of Judicial Conduct, and before that 10 years is up, there would be an opportunity to get rid of the judge, so.
I think Judge Clark essentially said this, but it favors consistency while also allowing, like Alice just said, for if there's any misconduct, there are mechanisms for which a judge can remove that. I think the consistency is important both in the administration of cases, but also in understanding the judges both as litigating and giving, like Judge Clark said, the judge time to grow into the job and learn to be the best judge they can be.
And that, within a particular court, who decides what judge is assigned to a case? Is it random? Or is it this particular judge?
So it depends. So, obviously, if it's a one judge judicial district, that judge hears everything. And so it's complicated because that's why we need senior judges like me, because sometimes there's a high rate of recusal because in small communities, my good friend Judge Minor, who's the only judge and president judge of Potter County, and who's just a lovely person. We have done a lot of presentations together, big county, small county, and he said, you know, we have 15 lawyers in Potter County, and I'm related to 5 of them. So, you know, that means he's going to be recusing himself from a lot of cases, so they get senior judges from another county to come in and hear these cases. But in large counties, so, well, in Philadelphia and Allegheny County, the divisions, the administrative judges of the divisions are appointed by the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. So the Supreme Court will decide, for example, who the administrative judge of the trial division is in Philly or the criminal division in Allegheny County. And then those judges will make assignments of the judges to different divisions. There are a lot of things that are taken into consideration with, you know, if it's a judge at a seniority and wants to change divisions, new judges. During the time I was president judge in one of the judicial elections, we elected 10 new judges. And so, yeah, so we had to decide, and then there were judges that wanted to change divisions. It was a nightmare. But so I met with the administrative judges and we looked at what their experience was as lawyers, what they may have wanted. Ultimately, it's up to the Supreme Court to decide that. So what happens is I make the initial assignment, I issue an order, then I have to file a petition with the Pennsylvania Supreme Court asking for the permanent assignment of that judge to the division. And then, so they have to then approve that ultimately, so.
But within the court, if a case comes in, it's random assignment, so and there are things taken into account, like, do you know the lawyers on this case, or do you know the parties? So there can be some factors as to which judge is going to hear which case within the division. So,
yeah, so in the other counties, so the president judge will decide if they want to have administrative judges for different types of work, and they'll appoint them, and then they'll assign the judges to do certain work, and then the administrative judges will divvy out the cases. They'll decide how they are. Sometimes there's different methods, you know, it could just be like a rotating, they could have a wheel like this today, you know, it's your turn to get a new case. But sometimes, like,
Just settled, you're free.
right, sometimes, for example, in the criminal division, they might want to, you know, there's more serious cases, so you don't want to overwork one judge, so they'll try to say, this judge gets a homicide case this time, you get the next one. It depends on what the needs of the court are. So the president judge and the administrative judges will really kind of decide how that happens.
And I'm not sure if Westmoreland County has this, but I know in Allegheny County, there's a complex commercial division within the Allegheny courts, so much, I think, two judges in the complex commercial court, sorry.
No, I can make it, there may be.
Justice Ward retired.
Yeah.
But regardless, if you have a case that you fulfill certain requirements, like it's over a certain monetary threshold, you can actually file I think it's a motion to move your case to the complex commercial position. If there's certain judges that hear those certain types of disputes, just because expertise and usually those cases are more involved, have longer trials for scheduling. So that mechanism does exist. I apologize, I know it's in Westmoreland County, but it does exist.
Right, there are sort of pockets of things, you know, there are under certain juveniles can ask for special juvenile immigrant status, and so we have a judge in Allegheny County, Judge Bush, who has some expertise, so all those cases will come to her. There are a couple of judges who will be her backup if needed, and they have done some of those cases. But so there are some little things as courts develop their needs, and now many courts have been encouraged because court has changed. We're everywhere, we're looking at more, especially within the criminal division, better ways of handling cases. So instead of the traditional finding guilty, send them to prison, and then let them fend for their own. So they're looking at underlying causes. So many courts have drug courts and mental health courts and veterans courts. And so they have judges specially assigned to hear those types of cases. Either those judges have expertise or an interest in those cases. Housing court, many jurisdictions, especially during the pandemic with the whole issue of evictions and housing, people got really creative. So there have been changes in the way that we do court, and so those cases, certain judges would be assigned to hear those types of cases.
I would say that the president judge of Westmoreland County has established a.
Yes, they have one for a while.
Let's have one more question.
Yeah, I was gonna say, then we'll go to the election part, and then we'll go back to whatever.
Yes.
In terms of like the Board of Judicial Conduct and like the administrative sides, what's the makeup of the people on those boards? Are they judges themselves, or are they appointed?
So so on the Judicial Conduct Board, they're appointed by the Supreme Court. There are judges, there are lay people, it's bipartisan, so they'll have so many Republicans, so many Democrats. So, and the same with the Court of Judicial Discipline, they're all appointed too, and they have a president judge, they select a president judge, even though they don't have to be lawyers, they have lay people too. It's sort of the same, but they are active if a person can have a trial. So if a judge wants to exercise the right to a trial before the Court of Judicial Discipline, there will be an actual trial, they will hear it, but they have judicial authority. It's not an elected, it doesn't fall within that pyramid that we have, but it's very much a court. And so you could go, if you ever want to see what they do on the website, you can see the complaints that have been filed, you can see the opinions and the decisions that have been entered by the Court of Judicial Discipline, their public record on the website.
I know what you're gonna do when you go home. Start reading up judges. Should we move on to the elections?
Yeah, we'll put time for more questions again at the
Yeah.
end.
I can speak to this
Yeah.
slide first. So we already touched on a lot of this information, so just to recap very quickly, the first point here, to be a judge besides a magistrate district judge, an MDJ, you must be a member of the bar of Pennsylvania. And again, if you're an MDJ that's not licensed, you have to pass the test that Judge Clark already spoke about here. The other point, I won't rehash everything here, that's of note. This goes back to something Judge Clark said earlier, that judges have to be district residents for 1 year prior to their election. So again, this is just emphasizing that judges can't move from Westmoreland to Allegheny or vice versa because they see a better opportunity to be elected. It encourages that the judge is actually a part of the community so that, they have some stake in the outcome of the case and they understand specifically what their community. I think every other point on there we covered, so and Bob.
Got this. Okay.
Retention elections, and this speaks to your question, for the elections that are retention elections, it is for, once you have been elected in a popular election in an odd year, then once your tenures are up, then you decide whether to run for retention, and it's a yes, no, and if you're getting a mail-in ballot this year, some of the retention elections are on the back of the ballot.
Just to make sure you turn your
Well,
ballot
the
over
back.
to see what's on the back.
But, should we go through,
Question.
Yeah, so what happens if the judge seeks retention of elections, but
doesn't get it?
yeah, doesn't get it?
Okay.
Perfect segue.
So, what happens is that there is an immediate vacancy in that position at the end of the year. So retention election is in November. the judge's term is finished in December. I mean, that's it, December 31st, done. For the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, Commonwealth Court, Superior Court, it's a complex, yeah, the governor would have an opportunity to appoint MDJs.
Oh, they don't run for
They don't run for retention. The governor would have an opportunity to appoint, a replacement, but the Senate would have to confirm the replacement. So it could, by 2/3 vote. So with a divided Senate, the governor would have to, either work a deal of having, we get these ones to get, judges replaced. And that could take a while. So there could be a period, if judges aren't retained, it could create challenges going forward, until replacements are appointed.
And correct me
And
if
confirmed.
correct me if I'm wrong, but if the governor does appoint someone, they would serve until the next election cycle takes place, so they're not elected for the same term as if they were.
Right. So
if they went through the election process, they would just serve until the next election.
So it'd basically be a year and a half because of judicial elections are in the odd years. So there wouldn't be an immediate election. That's why you go to the appointment and then you would go to.
But interestingly enough, so, usually they do appointments for Court of Common Pleas, eventually they get to it, but,
Eventually.
but, so normally, for example, the Supreme Court, they have, because either justices retire or pass away, or things happen, and so the governor sometimes will appoint, but, that person has to agree not to run for that position usually. That's usually, it's not of the law, but it's usually what they require if they want you to accept that appointment. So somebody would take a job that they know they would only have maybe for a couple of years. It's not the same with the Court of Common Pleas. Usually the judges who I was appointed, and then, I won in the election I ran that same year. But with the Supreme Court, that's usually kind of the unwritten agreement that I'll accept this appointment, but I can't run for that. I'm not going to run for that seat.
And so I'm gonna go to who's actually running for retention and who's actually running for. Can we start with, where should we start? How about Westmoreland County?
All right.
So I think we mentioned this before, there are 3 judges, in Westmoreland County who are up for retention. We did look this up. Harry Smale Jr., Timothy Kreider, and Scott Mears are all up for retention. I think Judge Smale is civil and orphans court. Judge Krieger is criminal, and I think Judge Mears is also criminal. But again, running for retention, there's one open seat. And I think Judge Clark mentioned this, that the candidate for the open seat is Matt Schmizzy, and he cross-registered to run as a Democratic primary and a Republican primary, won both. So my understanding is he's essentially unopposed for that open seat.
He's also a Pitt Greensburg alumni.
Well, there you have
As is his wife, who was one of my students.
Okay. I don't know if that's an endorsement or.
That's not an endorsement.
But, I will say that, when I was 14, I was babysitter for one of the guys who's running for retention, and I'll tell you what.
Well, I would say also, it's strange that it was uncontested the way it was.
Yeah.
SVT ran, they say uncontested on both Republican and Democrat ballots. I cannot remember a time where we've had an uncontested race for Court of Common Pleas seat in Westmoreland County.
Nobody wanted the job. I don't know. It's an interesting job. I mean, anyway, but, so that's what's going on in Westmoreland County, but you're not done because we have the intermediate appellate courts. This is the Superior Court.
Sure.
these are the open, there's one open seat for the, Superior Court. And those are the candidates. Matt Wolford is from Erie County, I think. But is an attorney, and then Stella Size from Philadelphia County. Again, the recommendations, there's a sheet that we can direct you to, that the Pennsylvania Bar Association does have the candidates fill out questionnaires, but the highly recommended, or not recommended ratings are developed through the bar associations. And I will say, as a lawyer, right around election time, I will get texts from a lot of friends who will say, who's running, who should I go for? I do research, and make them do their research first, and I'll give them suggestions because it can get very confusing. But it's important to do the research, and the information is available. So those are the choices for the open seat for the Superior Court. We're gonna, well,
Some of these candidates are in the one, particularly in the high schools.
and that's the League of Women Voters site as well, which is great. I mean, it's important to have the information.
Candidates have their qualifications, and then they answered questions, the same question.
And there's similar question prompts, but so the one retention for the Commonwealth Court is the Honorable Michael Wojcik. And as a side note, I sat next to him for 3 years of law school, and he's still a judge. No, he's a great guy. He grew up in Center County. His father was a coal miner. He was the second person in his family to go to college. And he's worked very hard, and he is a very thoughtful judge, but that is a biased opinion, not a partisan opinion. How's that? And then these are the open seat for the Commonwealth Court. Again, we have a not recommended because they didn't participate in the rating. We have the highly recommended and not rated at this time. So they're choices, but you can do the research because Pennsylvania's Vermont Court and the League of Women Voters have the information available to you to do research. Here's the question. Yeah.
Very new to the whole concept of retention. Judge Clark, I know you talked about a lot of judges maybe don't choose to run for retention. It's a lot of work, but they want to do something else. But if they are running for retention, is it typically kind of a toss up if they're going to be voted back in, or is it the most of the time a shoe in?
So, it depends on what's going on. Judges, I would say most of the time judges do not retain. There have been years where, and judges who have not gotten retained, even a justice on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, Justice Nigro, did not get retained. And so it does happen, but not usually.
We're talking about an exception that there, and a couple of things around why retentions are more likely to be a yes than a no. I mean, the examples of not being retained, the retention elections tend to be very low turnout, which is why we're doing events like this, because we think it's important for people to understand that the judges, whether they're running for retention or running for an open seat, are important to people's lives and what's being done. So
I always say, well, a lot of people don't really care. They don't focus on the courts or the importance of the courts until they have a decision that they don't like, or they feel like they weren't treated fairly. Then they care and realize, oh my goodness, this judges have a lot of authority and power. So when you're electing a judge or retaining a judge, you're electing or retaining someone that can incarcerate you, impose the death penalty, take your children, take your money, take your property, commit you to it voluntarily to a mental health facility. There's a lot of things that they can do. Judges wield a lot of power. And so it really is important, and it's important because the government, we have, or we're supposed to have 3 independent and co-equal branches of government. It's part of the checks and balances that is to make a democracy work. And so judges and the judicial branch of government plays a very important role in that. And so I always tell people it's really important to vote for judges and to, you know, have your vote matters, and to realize that you want good people in office and you want good people to remain in office. So.
And I think we're worried about, honestly, notice that none of us are shy about answering questions, but there's one more election that, the retention election on the Superior Court. Alice Tebow. Okay, fun fact about Alice, apart from her great name, her mother, Phyllis Beck, was the first woman judge on the Superior Court. You want a quiz? When was the first woman judge on the Superior Court in Pennsylvania? Come on. Give me a decade.
1980.
1981. You're very close.
And fraud.
I'll give you a but the fact that I'm old enough to remember, when there was a party in Allegheny County for the first 100 women lawyers practicing in Allegheny County, and there was a big party, and a lot of the first 100 women showed up to the party. So I know, but Alice Beck DeVoe and her mother Phyllis Beck are the only mother-daughter judges to serve, which is a pretty fabulous fact. She's a fantastic judge, and she comes to an honest. Her mother was a judge too.
Also, her mother was the co-founder of Pennsylvania.
Even better segue.
That is not an endorsement, that is just me stating a fact.
She was fantastic. She was a wonderful role model. And these are the 3 there are no open elections for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, but there are 3 justices who are running for retention. Christine Donahue, Ken Doherty, and David Wecht. They have all been given a recommended for retention rating. I will say, I watched, again, if you have insomnia, PCN broadcasts all of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court arguments. There are also Commonwealth Court arguments and Superior Court arguments, but the Supreme Court sat last week, and I listened to a bunch of the arguments, and the justices are very clear that their role is nonpartisan, that they have the Pennsylvania Constitution, again, oldest Supreme Court. The Constitution is older than the US Constitution, and their rights protected in the Pennsylvania Constitution that don't show up in the US Constitution. And all of these 3 justices have been instrumental in ensuring that Pennsylvanians have free and equal elections, that there are environmental rights, that they've been more submitted, that I was reading a 73-page decision the other day by one of these justices that went through the whole history of the Pennsylvania Constitution and why we have the rights that we have. So they're up for retention, and they're recommended for retention.
And PMC, this plug for an event that they just did is last week, correct?
Last Monday.
Yeah, they did,
Segue.
little,
Fireside
chat, with 3 justices here that are listed that are all recommended for retention, and there's an hour
Hour and a half.
Yeah.
PMCN broadcasted. It is on our website, pmconline.org.
Yeah, so if anybody is curious about what these justices believe in, what they stand for, any of that, just about them generally, that was all, I think, captured in that it's available on YouTube.
It's on our YouTube, it's on our website.
And I think Judge Clark mentioned that Chris Donahue will be hitting the mandatory retirement, and she explains that she's running for retention because she does have the expertise, she does have the knowledge, and she, feels like she still has a lot to give to the courts and to Pennsylvanians. She was very good.
So just think about though, if somebody asks a question, what happens if they don't get retained?
Oh, no.
If all three of them, for some reason, did not get retained, it would be utter chaos in the court, because then we would be left with 4 justices. Our Supreme Court only has 7 justices. And so.
In the
Voting, right, and so there may be some appointments, but they certainly wouldn't happen, 3 of them wouldn't happen right away. So, it would be quite chaotic, to have, be down that many justices. And we've had some, in lean years, I mean, because we've had justices pass away and,
It's very difficult.
it's very difficult, even when they're down 1,
They do a
So-
lot of work. They do a lot of work, and I'm impressed every day by the amount of work they do, but to spread it among 4 justices, when you might not have a quorum because somebody might have to recuse. There are all sorts of. Anyway,
did you have your hand up back?
more questions?
Another point I was gonna add is a question earlier reminded me of it, that about. I think there's starting to be an increased focus too on judicial elections, so I don't know if anybody saw, I was saying to the 2 of them, that the Wisconsin Supreme Court race that happened earlier this year, there was over $100 million that were put into that race. So I think this year, people are kind of projecting something similar for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, because there are 3 positions that are up for retention. So I think it's gonna be an increased focus too in the media, so again, just do your research, be informed. Watch the PNC's thing with the justices to hear everything from the words direct. But I did just want to say that because I do think this is going to be a point of emphasis this year and moving forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
If they're not retained, the governor gets complaints on them, does that have to go through Senate?
Yes.
They're.
Yeah, so that's where there could be an interim period, which could be, challenging.
So a couple of years ago, there was a House bill, I think, or Senate bill, where they were proposing to change the election of judges to districts.
So Supreme Court justices, yes. I don't think that ever came to fruition, but I don't think it totally did yet. So
It hasn't happened yet.
it hasn't happened yet.
Okay, yeah, I think that's when I first became aware of the organization.
Well, and there's an we were having a discussion before the program started. Pennsylvania is one of 7 or 8 states that has partisan elections for judges. And are there other ways to select judges? Yes, there are. There are, you can have a nonpartisan election, you could have by pure gubernatorial appointment, recommendations from the committee and the governor gets picked. And then there's some hybrid models of that. And under the Pennsylvania Constitution, we elect our judges. And so we have the system that we have. I actually had this conversation with Justice Wecht at one point. I said, how do you feel about electing judges? And he was running for judge. So he said, I believe in this process. But his point, and I think it's well taken, was that Pennsylvanians get to choose directly who their judges are, as opposed to being filtered through. And like I said, it can be hard to get all the information they need to get before you vote for a judge. But Pennsylvanians get to elect their judges.
Yes.
And we get good judges like Judge.
And it's statewide, right? It's.
Well, for the Supreme
For
Court,
the appellate, for all the appellate courts statewide.
for Superior, Commonwealth, and Supreme, yes, it's statewide.
Kind of follow-up question on that. How do the judges for means or separation independence comes out of branches, considering that they're elected on the partisan elections? So how do they separate, this partisan?
So, the partisan means they're running on a ticket, so they're identified in the primary, as running as a Democrat or Republican, but, or both, the cross register. But, and I think this is where the fireside chat, Justice Doherty was very good about talking about when, they become justices, they are not an R or a D, they are one of the 7 justices of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and their primary responsibility is to enforce Pennsylvania Constitution and the laws enacted by Pennsylvania. So judges are not allowed by law to campaign by making promises. So they can't say, if you elect me judge, I'm going to vote this way on this kind of case. Because judges are supposed to view the facts of the law that are in front of them and how they decide. Do you know what the right answer for any lawyer is? You ask a lawyer any kind of questions, the right answer is always, it depends. Because it depends on the facts and it depends on the law and it depends on how the evidence is presented. So just as I would want to have a judge say, this is how I'm going to rule in all criminal cases, or this is how I'm going to rule in all domestic violence cases, because every case is different and it depends on the facts.
And there's some comfort, for me at least, so even when you're running, for example, you can't ask people for money, you have to have a separate treasurer and campaign committee to do that, to accept any money, you can't do that. And then if you're elected or appointed, then there's very strict rules about what judges can and cannot do. So we can't engage in any partisan political activity, we can't attend political events. And sometimes it's hard because there's a question about, is this a political event? I mean, I can do this because this is an educational nonpartisan event, but I can't come and endorse any candidate. I can't go to a fundraiser. I can't contribute to anybody's campaign. Sometimes that's good because then it's people don't ask for money. But the good part about it is I know when I made a decision, I feel like nobody's going to force me to change that decision. Nobody can fire me from my job. The only people that could remove me from my job is you, the voters, if you think I didn't do a good job. So, you know, just because you belong to one political party and someone else belongs to another, it's irrelevant as to the issue that's before the court. So I have to make a decision based upon the law and the evidence that's presented in my courtroom. And I feel that not having all of those, having those restrictions as to what I cannot and can and cannot do as a judge really gives me some comfort and allows me to make the decision that I feel is the best decision without interference. And that's part of why we should have those 3 separate and co-equal branches of government. No governor or no state senator or no state representative or mayor or city council person should tell me, threaten me, or say, I want you to decide a case this way, because it's not what's supposed to happen. And so right now under Pennsylvania, I'm very comfortable with that. I think the judges are independent and they can make the decisions as they see fit. Not to say that we haven't had judges who have crossed the line or judges who have done things wrong, and many of them have been severely disciplined for those things. So some have gone to jail. We've had so there are ways of dealing with those situations.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to advance, but everything that Allison just we're saying, these are all codified in the Judicial Code of Conduct.
Yeah.
So everything they just said is actually law, and that's written that judges are forced to abide
I'll be
by.
getting these slides, by the way.
Yeah, so you'll be
It's a lot of information.
That is very helpful. Then my question is, why would there be so much money involved in the election? I'll leave it out.
Well, so
Advertising.
Yes.
So I mean, and there are partisan
people that,
groups
right,
are
so
going
it's
to
not that,
advocate.
so there are other people putting money. So in Wisconsin, there were other political factions that were making that happen. And so that's part of the issue when judges run for election, you know, and now it's a whole new world. At one time, I think some things have changed. I think like for Court of Common Pleas, people aren't spending as much money because what they're doing is they have sites on social media platforms and people, and it's much cheaper than the old days of when people did television and radio and things like that. So,
Emory boards.
right, so, and some people still do what we call grassroots campaigns, they just get out there and knock on doors and shake hands and go to events and, are not spending a lot of money. I didn't have a lot of money when I ran, I just didn't have it, and then I had, unfortunately, a campaign manager that stole quite a bit of the money that we raised, and so that sort of, it was a nightmare, So you just pound the pavement and do the grassroots thing. And in the Court of Common Pleas section work, it's a little harder on a statewide election. This is a big state. And so traveling around from county to county, trying to shake hands and meet people and, there is expenses to it, but, you know, in some places, there's been a lot of pressure to, unseat judges and justices and putting up candidates, and so people with a lot of money who want a different outcome will put their money behind that.
And it's the,
Scott Mears, who's up for retention as a Court of Common Pleas, he has a great story when he ran 10 years ago. He knocked on 40,000 doors, had 5 guns full of them. But one, and he always attested to the cheap way of 40,000 doors.
but your question is a good one, why is money being put into it? And the presumption is, that there can be kind of a throw the bombs out kind of mentality of, I didn't like rulings, so the judges must be wrong. I would say the judges are, doing what they're supposed to do, but Judge Clark is absolutely right, the nature of elections has changed, and the fact that, advertising can affect elections, that's why there's so much.
And I think, so when I ran, there was no social media. There, you know, so you had to really get out there and meet people. I think social media has changed everything, and so much stuff gets posted on social media that may or may not be factual, may or may not be true, but it affects the way people think, so people have to counter that. So I didn't have any of that when I ran. I said there was no GPS, we had maps, you know, to go to Allegheny County. How to get to the place, you know, I spread the map out on the dining room table and said I have to go from here to here to here, and what's the best way to get there. But everything has changed, and so we're just, you know, instantly, I can say something right now, and somebody could be right on social media, on somebody's Facebook page or Instagram or whatever, and they might not even have the whole thing. I'm sitting here, this event is not over, but somebody could be, you know, recording it and posting what I'm saying, and so there's this need for that instant response. So it's just everything has changed, and so things, sometimes unfortunately, it costs money. I feel that it's really unseemly that we have to, that especially for judicial races, that so much money has to be spent. But I also feel that way about college education. Why was spending that much money for something that?
Except in Pitt Greensburg.
We're still the same camp.
No,
Judge Clark alluded to this, but I do just want to make it clear, the rules, the judge themselves, the candidate cannot solicit money themselves, it has to go through their campaign committee, so their campaign committee, which is, you know, step removed from them, they're the ones that take any donations, solicit money, so it's a step removed from the candidate themselves, and the candidate has a duty to make sure that their committee is following the same rules that otherwise would apply to judicial code. So there is, you know, that balance of collecting money, but still having a step away from where the judge is being influenced or influencing others to.
but there are outside organizations that also do advertising.
Right.
Which are not
Which
in
not, yeah.
control of the entities.
We are getting close to time, so we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions or some closing thoughts from our speakers.
Just vote. And I feel like we're preaching to the choir in a lot of respects, because I know the League of Women Voters does such a good job about getting that message out. And I know that there are other events that the league has in the county. But I think we're all here tonight because we understand the importance of voting, and anything that encourages people to vote in an off-year election where it's like, really, there's election in November? Yes, there is an election in November. They turn over the bell.
And judges, I mean, just the role, judges are very important. I hope you realize that they play an important part in, just our day-to-day lives and just, in our communities. And it starts with, in Pennsylvania, with the magisterial district courts and on up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So I hope that each and every one of you will vote and encourage everyone you know that's eligible to vote, to make sure that they're registered and that they vote, this election and every election.